The 7 levels of horror films, explained.
Level 1.
Not actually horror. The Visit is M. Night Shyamalan, making a horror-coded family dramedy with a third-act twist that plays more like a sitcom finale than a nightmare. A Quiet Place is, structurally, a sci-fi survival thriller that happens to have a monster with bad Yelp reviews about noise complaints. Signs is straight-up an alien invasion family drama that occasionally remembers it's supposed to be scary and puts a green hand on a cornfield camera for exactly 4 seconds. Get Out gets filed here constantly by horror purists. Not because it's bad, it's genuinely one of the best films of its decade, but because it's a social thriller wearing a rubber horror mask, which, ironically, is thematically perfect and nobody appreciates the joke. Bird Box is just The Happening's cooler cousin, riding pure Netflix algorithm momentum into horror, the same way I ride pure delusion into thinking I'll go to the gym tomorrow. Deep dive time, and we're starting with Get Out, because the genre classification discourse around this movie is genuinely unhinged in the best way. When Get Out won the Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture, musical or comedy, the internet had a collective aneurysm, because nothing about The Sunken Place says comedy, unless your comedy palette is exclusively generational trauma. Jordan Peele himself clarified it's a documentary, which is the single funniest and most terrifying thing a filmmaker has said about his own work in the last decade. A Quiet Place gets the same treatment for a faster reason. Take away the monsters, and you have a survival family drama about grief and communication, which is what most critics actually wrote entire essays about instead of the jump scares. John Krasinski built an incredible sound design showcase, but ask yourself honestly, were you more scared or more stressed about a nail sticking out of a staircase?
Level 2.
Broken on Arrival. Slender Man 2018 took a genuinely unsettling piece of internet folklore, something that literally inspired a real-world stabbing, which should tell you the source material had teeth, and turned it into a rushed, incoherent theatrical cut that became a punchline before opening weekend was even over. Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, is exactly what it sounds like, and somehow still manages to undersell how little competence went into the finished product. The Human Centipede 2 took the ambition of the first film's shock value and cranked it so hard it collapsed into pure incoherence, which, considering the first one was already about a human centipede, is genuinely an achievement. Cabin Fever 2 forgot literally everything that made the original an effective slow-burn body horror gross out and replaced it with nothing. Rings, the 2017 legacy sequel, took the single scariest videotape in cinema history and somehow made you check your phone instead of your pulse. Deep dive, Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, because this is a masterclass in the gap between marketing and product, and I genuinely think future film students should study it as a case of viral velocity outrunning actual filmmaking. The premise, childhood mascots turned feral killers after Disney's copyright lapsed, is a genuinely funny, genuinely marketable idea. The trailer got more organic engagement than most studio horror releases get.
Level 3.
Corporate Scare Machine. The Nun 2 is Conjuring Universe product number 9, or 10, I've lost count, and so has Warner Bros. Marketing team, and it's competently made and instantly forgettable, like a jump scare with a quarterly earnings call attached. Insidious. The Red Door is franchise fatigue you can set your watch to. Winchester wastes an Oscar winner, Helen Mirren, on a haunted house plot so generic it feels algorithmically generated before algorithms were even doing that. The Forest puts Natalie Dormer in Japan's Aokigahara Forest and somehow makes real, well-documented tragedy feel like generic Haunted Woods filler. Truth or Dare is peak assembly line Blumhouse. Take a fun premise, add a demon, subtract any actual craft. The 2021 Wrong Turn requel is polished, well shot, and completely hollow, legacy sequel energy, with none of the legacy. Deep dive, The Nun 2, purely because the Conjuring universe is the most successful horror business model in modern history, and deserves to be talked about the way we talk about the MCU, as a machine, not as movies. 8+ films, over $2 billion worldwide, built on a formula so reliable, it's basically a spreadsheet, with jump scares plugged in at the 22 and 41-minute marks. Truth or Dare gets an honorable mention as basically the platonic ideal of algorithm horror. Cheap premise, teen cast, PG-13 scares, in and out of theaters before you can register it happened, which is, unsettlingly, also how I'd describe most of my early 20s. And before we move on, it would be a dream if you could help this channel reach 100 subscribers, and it's completely free. But give that same machine an actual voice, and something starts to break through the polish.
Level 4.
Undone by One Choice. Chapter 2 took the tight, terrifying momentum of Chapter 1 and buried it under a 3-hour runtime and a CGI-soaked climax that trades dread for spectacle. Hereditary is near universally considered a modern masterpiece, right up until the final 15 minutes, where the tonal pivot from grounded grief horror to full supernatural theater splits audiences down the middle. The Witch delivers some of the most meticulously researched, slow-building dread in the genre's history, and then the ambiguous, fully supernatural ending either lands as transcendent or as a cop-out, depending who you ask. Us gives you 2 career-best Lupita Nyong'o performances, and then spends the third act over-explaining a mythology that worked better as pure nightmare logic. Split builds a genuinely tense, character-driven thriller, and then the M. Night Shyamalan cameo twist retroactively turns it into unbreakable fan service, for better or worse. Deep Dive, Hereditary, because this is the closest thing horror Twitter has to a genuine civil war. Ari Aster spends 2 hours building one of the most devastating, grounded portraits of grief and inherited trauma ever put on screen. The dinner table scene alone, where Toni Collette's character says the quiet part loud about wishing she'd never had children, is more disturbing than anything with a demon in it.
Level 5.
Great, missing the culture moment. These films have nothing technically wrong with them. Ask a horror critic and they'll tell you these are borderline flawless. The Babadook is an art house horror landmark about grief and single motherhood that critics adored on release and that mainstream audiences mostly ignored, at least until a Netflix categorization glitch and the internet's chaotic sense of humor turned the Babadook into an accidental queer icon years later, which is its own strange story. It Follows has a genuinely brilliant, elegant concept and a synth score that influenced half of horror since 2014, but it never got the box office or franchise afterlife to match its critical reputation. The Descent is, technically, one of the most flawlessly executed creature horror films ever made, and most non-horror fans have simply never heard of it. Session 9 is a slow-burn masterclass in dread set in an actual abandoned asylum, and it remains a well-kept secret instead of a household name. Talk to Me, from 2023, is the closest recent film to breaking into this conversation, but it just hasn't had the years yet to prove it's not a flash in the pan. Deep Dive, The Babadook, because its afterlife is honestly one of the funniest and most genuinely moving accidents in internet history. This is a film about a mother, played by Essie Davis, unraveling under the weight of grief and an exhausting, possibly supernatural child, and it's one of the most technically controlled debut features of the last 15 years. Now picture a film with all of that, plus the moment. That's where the borderline goats live.
Level 6.
Elite, one technicality from GOAT. Every single film here is a legitimate, defensible pick for greatest horror film ever made. I mean that. And every single one is held back by one small, specific, almost technical asterisk. The Exorcist has the reputation, the real-world cursed production mythology, the cultural weight, but the pacing and exposition of its middle act genuinely drags for modern audiences raised on tighter runtimes. Alien is close to flawless as a standalone film, but its own franchise's diminishing sequels have retroactively muddied the purity of the original in the popular imagination. Rosemary's Baby is nearly perfect craft from start to finish, and the only real ding is a final reveal that some find delivers with slightly less punch than the 2 hours of dread that built up to it. Jaws redefined the summer blockbuster and terrified a generation out of the ocean, and its one blemish is a mechanical shark, nicknamed Bruce, that famously didn't work half the time. The original Nightmare on Elm Street created one of horror's most iconic villains and is dragged down by exactly one specific thing, a lead performance that hasn't aged as gracefully as everything surrounding it. Deep Dive, Jaws, because this is the greatest technicality in film history, and it's not really a flaw at all. It's an accident that became a masterclass. Bruce the Shark broke down constantly during production, famously sinking in salt water it wasn't built for, and Spielberg, out of pure necessity, was forced to shoot around it. Suggestion instead of reveal. POV shots. John Williams' two-note theme, doing the work the rubber shark couldn't. The result is one of the most tension-efficient films ever made. The Exorcist deserves a nod too, mostly because its production mythology, actors reporting real injuries, a set fire, a numbing sense of dread on set that crew members still talk about, is so tangled up with the film's legend that it's genuinely hard to separate the cursed production from the finished product's power. Remove even that last technicality, and you arrive at the films nobody can argue with.
Level 7.
This is the tier with no asterisks, no "yeah but," no middle act that drags. Psycho invented modern horror grammar in a single film, and the shower scene isn't just iconic, it's cultural shorthand that people who've never seen the movie could still describe to you, shot by shot. The Shining is technical perfection from Kubrick, endlessly picked apart, endlessly referenced, spawning its own conspiracy documentary cottage industry decades later. Halloween, 1978, created the entire slasher template from scratch, and Michael Myers remains one of the only horror villains who's arguably more famous than most A-list actors working today. The Silence of the Lambs did something no other horror film has done before or since. It won Best Picture, genuinely transcending the genre, and gave us a villain in Hannibal Lecter who's quoted by people who've never watched a single frame of horror in their life. Deep dive, Psycho, because Hitchcock didn't just make a great film, he ran one of the greatest marketing campaigns in cinema history alongside it. He famously banned theaters from seating latecomers once the film started, turning the viewing itself into an event with rules, which sounds insane until you realize it worked, and audiences went along with it because they trusted the experience was worth protecting. The Shining earns its spot the same way, through Kubrick's obsessive, borderline mythical 100-plus takes on single scenes, and the fact that Room 237, an entire feature-length documentary, exists purely to catalog fan theories about hidden meanings in the carpet pattern. When your film generates its own conspiracy theory ecosystem 40 years later, you don't get an asterisk, you get a permanent seat at the top. These aren't just horror movies anymore. They're the vocabulary. Everything else on this list is still trying to speak. That's it for the day, and if you want more of this, it would genuinely mean a lot if you help this channel hit 100 subscribers. It's completely free. Thanks for watching.